they can. We're here today, we're briefing by the Department of Labor, and I'm sure you hear this all the times, guys, but I know Economic Matters likes our briefings to be just that, brief, because there's always, we'll have other chances to discuss. You'll be meeting with some of us individually as well. So I look forward to your brief remarks to guide us through. And for my colleagues listening, I would like to remind everybody that we're dealing with it's not the same agency it was last year. So I would ask you guys to quell any, asking questions is great, but temper that with an understanding that we have a new group of individuals that we're going to be working with, and they cannot be held accountable for things that may have been done in the past. So I just ask that you guys keep your remarks, keep that in mind when you're giving your remarks. I see way fewer people that are on the list, so if you guys would like to introduce yourselves and get going, that'd be fine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the committee. I am Portia Wu. I'm the new Acting Secretary of the Maryland Department of Labor on day 9, I guess. With me today are members of the team from the Division of Unemployment Insurance. So I just want to introduce them quickly. Lakivu Speaks, who's the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Division of Unemployment Insurance. And we also have the team here, Prahalad Patil, the Director of Beacon, E.J. Shoebridge, the Director of UI Benefits, Marius Chikora, Director of UI Contributions, and Barbara Bernstein, the Director of UI Policy. So we're here today to provide a briefing to the committee on UI insurance. I do want to take this opportunity to thank the dedicated state employees who have worked so hard during what's been a really challenging 3 years. They have worked tirelessly along with many of you and your legislative staff to serve the many Marylanders in need of our services at what oftentimes is the most difficult time of their lives. So I'm grateful for their continued commitment to service, and I look forward to being part of the change here in Maryland and making sure the Department of Labor can better serve Marylanders moving forward and truly leave no one behind. This is an overview of the program. I'm sure many of you have questions, but we're happy to speak with you more in detail about that. The first point is that, of course, unemployment insurance, or UI, provides vital benefits to folks who have lost their jobs and are continuing to seek work. We pay out hundreds of millions of dollars of benefits each year to support Marylanders. And as I noted, public servants have worked very hard on this, but we know we need to do better. Frankly, our system has to be more user-friendly, more responsive, more secure, and more solvent. There are a couple areas where we're focused. And I would say the pandemic really highlighted for us and for you some of the failings of the system, and also some of what we can expect, I think, in this new era of increasingly fast and sophisticated cybercrime and cyber tools. These are just some of the areas where we're focused on making improvements. Customer service, and particularly things like call center wait times, staffing shortages, addressing these sophisticated fraud schemes, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, but also making sure that legitimate claimants aren't caught in a web, because as we try to be more secure, that can also make it more challenging for individuals sometimes to prove they have a legitimate claim. We do have a newer system, which we'll talk about in a second, but there are still things that could be improved, and we recognize a lot of people use smartphones or mobile phones now for a lot of their dealings, and we need to think about how to move into that era. And then long-term, we want to talk more about solvency and making sure the trust fund is strong in order to be sure benefits can be paid. Just as an overview, this is, I won't read through the slide, but generally speaking, individuals who are eligible for benefits, the Maryland benefit levels go between $50, which is the minimum, and $430, and go for up to 26 weeks. As you know, the federal program can, in times of need, add additional extensions or additional separate benefits. Generally speaking, individuals have to be unemployed through no fault of their own and have to have made sufficient wages during what we call a base period, which is a certain set of time looking backward, and be available to work. There are a number of things they have to do also. They have to keep looking for work. They have to demonstrate that they are doing so, and file and report in to the Department of Labor. I wanted to highlight this. I think you're aware of it, but especially for some of the newer members, basically during the pandemic, we saw a 10-fold increase in demand on the system. And so I'm sure you can all envision why this, so many systems frankly went down or weren't able to function, because it was practically an overnight surge. But there were also many more benefits paid because of the additional and new federal unemployment programs that came online during pandemic. As you can see, we are now back to more of a typical workflow and benefits level. I want to say here that we have, in 2020, we brought on a new online system, which we refer to as Beacon. Suffice it to say, the systems were super old before that, and a lot of things had to be done manually. We finally have a centralized portal where individuals and employers can, do all the tasks they need to do, like file claims, prove their identity, do other things. And the staff can use it too, and they can assist individuals in using it. We keep upgrading the security features. If there are any questions about this, I'd be happy to refer those to my team. Suffice it to say, it works, it's more secure. It is probably not the most streamlined way it could be, and certainly it is not as user-friendly as it could be, probably for both employers and for claimants. And that's something we're continuing to work on, and we actually have some contracts and some relationships with national organizations and Federal Department of Labor to help us to do that. In terms of serving our customers, there are a number of ways in which, and I will say, it is our obligation to pay benefits when due. That is the obligation under federal law. And so unemployment insurance is always a balance of paying quickly so people can have those life-saving benefits, at the same time trying to guard against wrong payments, overpayments, or outright fraud, which we're seeing more and more of. These are some of the tools. I won't read them verbatim, but there are a number of ways in which individuals can access us through video kiosks, where you can do a video call. We have a call center. We obviously have also improved our online tools so individuals can apply online and go and prove their eligibility that way. And we have a UI ombudsman to try to help people when they're not able to get access and to get through. Individuals can also go to American Job Centers or seek help from our reemployment services there. In terms of employers, one of the key things to understand is that the federal government pays for administrative costs, but the benefits and a lot of other work are paid for by employer contributions. Sometimes there are these federal emergency programs, which I referred to. Employers fall into two categories. Most employers pay a rate, sort of a basic tax rate. There are some employers that are what are called reimbursable, and that's usually government or nonprofit, where they pay back if their workers end up using and filing claims. Not sure what happened. I don't know if delegates have the slides in front of them. Do y'all have a hard copy of the slides? Oh, you do? Okay, online, wonderful. Well, I think we're on slide. I don't want to proceed. Yeah, hold on. What happened? Are we in the document? Oh, I see. Okay, I see. Well, I'm happy to, maybe I'll just use words to describe what's on the slide a little bit more. Yes. So what I was saying was there's a schedule of rates, and those rates go up and down, and those are the rates which depending on how the trust fund balance is looking, the rates increase or decrease. So right now, as of January, Maryland's trust fund balance was $1.48 billion. We have 6 rate tables from the lowest to the highest, A through F, and right now what we call Table C is in effect. If you look at that, that can mean that employers pay anywhere from 1% to 10.5%, or $85 to $892.50 per employee per year. However, the overwhelming majority of employers are paying at the lower end of the rate, so that 90% are paying 2.3% or less of payroll. And And I think something that's also important to remember is the tax base for UI is relatively small. It is not over the entire payroll of individual employees. It's based on the first, how many $1,000s? I'm sorry, I can't remember the tax. 8,500. 8,500. And we can talk about Maryland is somewhat different. Different states set that differently. And I should also note, employers, like the rate they pay, whether it's higher or lower, is in part based upon their experience. It's what's called experience rating, which is a pretty common concept in insurance. So the next slide is talking about fraud. So unfortunately, the pandemic really showcased what we were seeing in terms of an uptick in fraud. We have flagged, during the pandemic, so April 2020 to December 2022, 1.84 million claimants and 2.4 million claims as presenting issues and concerns and being potentially fraudulent. And I want to emphasize here, one of the difficulties is that sometimes an individual may have incomplete identification or refuse to provide a second form. That could be a legitimate claimant. It could also be someone who has stolen some of somebody else's identification and is trying to masquerade as a legitimate claimant. And it's often very difficult to tell the difference. Some of the most common forms of fraud we are seeing this identity fraud. People are able to access millions of personal identification records right now online and file fraudulently in the name of legitimate people. People taking over other accounts, pretending to be the Maryland government, then getting access to others' accounts. We're also starting to see many more fake employers, which is something new, setting up dummy companies and then filing claims using those fictitious wages. And then other, sort of hijack frauds, people setting up these third-party agents and using others to, pretend to file claims on individuals' behalf. So some of the ways in which we've tried to address these concerns about fraud, we have more in-house fraud detection algorithms. I will note that these algorithms detect potential risk, but humans still then go back and evaluate and make decisions where these risks are flagged. We also ask individuals if there are initial concerns that indicate it may be a case of fraud, that they are able to use other means to verify their identity, such as by presenting identity verification documents online, validating individuals' banking information, checking when we see somehow suddenly multiple claimants are all submitting the same routing number, like to the same account. And other ways to try to figure out, how individuals are presenting fraudulent information. We do try to be sort of general about this because we are concerned that, every time we identify specific things we do, there are often a number of individuals that become sophisticated and try to find workarounds. So we're happy to discuss further our tools. And then finally, I'll just say, some of this is funded through our own work, but a lot of it is funded through the Federal Department of Labor. We have received a federal grant, which goes through fiscal year 2024 to improve equitable access to unemployment insurance, to upgrade our current systems, including Beacon and our mobile apps. We've had the federal government come in, sort of sent in a tiger team to help us look at this and take learnings that they've gotten from states around the country, because all states faced very similar issues. And we also received some additional supplemental budget requests. I will close by saying federal UI is an important source of support, but the increase in sophistication of targeting that we've seen and the resources needed to address those concerns continues to increase. And so over the longer term, we'll need to be discussing both with the federal government and at the state level how we can make sure the resources are there to combat these kinds of attacks, and also to make sure that Marylanders have adequate benefits to support themselves as they continue to look for work. With that, I'm happy to pause, and I and the team are happy to take any questions.
We do have several questions at this time. Start with Steve. Terrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Welcome. Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you earlier. I have two very simple questions. One, the staffing that we built up to. Where are we currently with the level of staffing with UI?
We have 400 and I believe 30 pins with UI merit staff, and like about 20 contractual employees.
How much is that down from our high? Or from normal, if you will, from pre-pandemic? Or is it up?
Pre-pandemic, we're still at low levels. When you go back to 2019 or 2018, at one point in time, we were like 500 or 600 staff pins.
Okay. And where are we today?
Today, we're at 400.
400, okay. My other question was on this fraud, and this is something we've talked about in other committees. What are we doing to recoup the money? What are the charges going against people? Because I understand there's federal money here, so is it a different set of charges because it's federally funded, or is it just you all going after people who committed fraud with basic state charges? Do you know?
Yeah, please go ahead.
We have established overpayment when folks committed fraud, and we pursue them through collection means as well. But we also working with the OIG to kind of for the prosecution.
I know this is all new to you, and I apologize.
Yeah,
I started thinking
I'm also 4 months. 4 months.
Yeah, maybe I wouldn't mind following up on this because it's kind of
Absolutely.
important where these things go. But I appreciate the time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I believe Adelic Fennell is next. And again, I would remind my colleagues, some of these individuals are quite new, so don't expect everything right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, will we continue to have a UI representative to help and assign to our district or our office in reference to people, our citizens who's having a difficult time receiving unemployment insurance?
I will commit that you will have a point of contact. I know we staffed it at a certain very high level during the pandemic. We need to figure out sort of post-pandemic what's possible, but I think we all understand we're not going back to the way things were before pandemic. And I know it's challenging for your offices because you have both legitimate claimants, and that's actually something we discovered is sometimes fraudulent claimants are also now pushing and asking for help to try to get their claims through. So I will commit that I'll look into it more deeply, but we will definitely have a way that you have a point of contact so you can address and resolve claims.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, just talking about that 90-10 split as far as UI is concerned and the businesses that are paying that, what does that look like? Is it 90% of the small businesses are paying at the low end, or is it the 10% is the bulk of small businesses in Maryland are paying at the higher end?
I don't know the distribution. I mean, I know it's experience rated, so it's not so much small and large. It tends to be how often you are laying off workers and not. But I don't know if anyone in the team
Mary,
could
if you wanna.
Yeah.
Yes, said it correctly. Depends on the experience rate or unique product size of about 2%, 1%. Actually, mostly in Maryland, we have more of small size business. Most of them.
That's exactly the information I was looking for. Second's an action item. If you could provide, because it's a second question, if you could provide the committee with a breakdown of the amount of fraudulent claims that were flagged, the amount of fraudulent claims that have actually been borne out to be true, and the dollar amount. If you could come back behind and provide that via email, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I do want to say one other thing on the issue of the pay. Because Maryland's tax base is relatively small, it does mean it's not as spread. So in businesses with more lower wage workers tend to find, that the burden is sort of pushed to that low end of the wage scale. So that may be something I want to think. It's not they're paying more, but like if you have a worker, your workers are making $100,000 or $150,000 a year, you're only paying on that initial part of the wage base. So it does mean that I don't want to say disproportionately, because you have to look at how the numbers actually
And
shake
that's-
out, but it's
yeah, that's
worth
what I'm
looking at.
I want to
yeah.
make sure the bulk of our small businesses aren't paying the larger portion
Right,
of the UI.
exactly. It sort of probably depends on how highly waged their workers are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate following up with Delegate Fennell that you'll be sending us a person, because that's been very key, for our constituents, so thank you for that. Are most of the workers, is everybody back to working in person, full-time?
We're still on a hybrid schedule, but we have ways of monitoring staff and staff production. We do have metrics that we look at, and we tie the metrics to performance.
Do you have a plan for bringing everyone back full-time in the office?
I will have to look into that. I will note, our UI folks work in claims centers, so some of that processing is done remotely when they're handling it. They are not meeting in person with claimants, is my understanding for the most part. They're taking it as a call, but I'm happy to look into that further. We do have a broader hybrid work policy that I'll be examining as I come in.
And I appreciate that. I think one of the frustrations was that with the working from home, using the phone numbers that people don't answer because they don't recognize the number, and then they don't have someone to call back, and then they start kind of all over again. And so if there's some better way so that, somebody can call the person back, and I understand they don't want their personal information, but there has to be a better way of having people being able to follow up. So if there's something that could be done there. And then my last real quick question. So I have had over the last couple of years every season with bus drivers who they work and then they're off for a bit of time. And so even this past season, there's been a lot of frustration, and I just get a slew of people who are really having a hard time with the system understanding that type of work. Is that something that you're working on?
Yeah, we are. We're talking about reasonable assurance. We're talking about
It's a seasonal, folks are laid off seasonally.
yeah, the bus drivers. We're looking into that issue.
Okay.
It's a hot topic. So looking into
Okay, great. Thank you. If you could give us a follow-up later on, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congratulations again and welcome, and thank you, and thanks to the whole team who got us through a really tough period. And I just wanted to ask you to sort of like zoom out a little bit and comment on, I think we tend to think about unemployment insurance in terms of the individuals that it helps, and that's a really crucial piece of it. But I just wonder, again, given your really impressive background, if you would comment a little bit on two other aspects of it. And one is the importance of having sufficient unemployment for really good job matching. So making the, I think often there's a concern about, and there was, I think, a misguided debate about does unemployment keep people from taking work, but like the importance of having sufficient benefits so that the job matching is as efficient as it should be. And then the second is if you could just make a few comments about just the bigger macroeconomic importance of the sort of the countercyclical impact that it has on the entire economy, which I think is also really important for us to be thinking about when we're thinking about what changes might we make to UI.
Sure. First of all, I completely agree, and thank you, Delegate Charcuti, and I know this is an issue you've studied deeply, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about it. I think absolutely the issue is, and that's why I emphasized, unemployment insurance is for people who are still seeking to find jobs in the job market, and that's why I know people have concerns about it, but that's why we have the certification, that's why we have the requirement. People are continuing to look for work. Absolutely having adequate benefits, I think, is very important to the issue of, okay, just say I have a skill, and in healthcare, I'm a nurse's assistant, or I work in nursing, and I want to find another job. I may be able to take another job immediately in fast food service or driving somewhere, but I'd rather find one that fits my skills and that will enable me to progress in my career. And I think our economy is also better served by people who have skills finding jobs that match their skills and that can stay in for a longer time. And frankly, employers are better served by that too, because they get a better fit as a worker. They also get a worker who's more likely to stay. and to help them reduce turnover as opposed to, oh, wait, they took that retail job and they left after 3 weeks because they found the thing they were looking for. So that is an important piece of unemployment insurance. And I think more broadly, it also creates the countercyclical stabilization effect that you talked about. You know, the reason that it's important to pay benefits when due, and sometimes that's difficult, as we all know from the challenges, is otherwise you face this domino cascading set of effects. Individuals lose their job, they lose their home, their cars repossessed, like all sorts of things start happening, and pretty soon you have families sliding quickly into poverty. And so when the economy is weak, it's particularly important that those benefits are there in a robust way. I will say it's challenging the way the federal government adds on new extensions during recessions, and I think all states have had a problem where then their existing system has to quickly scramble, and sometimes the eligibility isn't quite the same as the underlying state rules, and so you have to create all these workarounds and special rules. And I think that's what we saw during pandemic, is you had different pockets of people eligible for different things. That's super confusing to claimants as well. So getting our systems to be more agile and flexible is a huge part of it, but I think also trying to work with the federal government to get a little bit more of a better set of triggers, because often their triggers for new benefits come on very late when the economy's pretty deep in recession, and a lot of people are already hurting there, so that makes it difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, congratulations, Secretary Wu. I'd like to call you Secretary Wu. I cannot tell you how proud I am to see an Asian American woman leading such an important department. My question is related to the UI Trust Fund. I remember a lot of small businesses were crying foul because all of a sudden, literally overnight for some of them, they went from, I think, a table A to a table F, and without notification. They were shocked at the high rate they had to pay. Like in one instance, it was like an 800% increase, you know. So I don't know if we have gone back to that for these businesses, or how for future references we can do a better job of easing into it, because in that case, even though Governor Hogan putting like $1 billion to stabilize the fund, we still ended up, you know, having to raise dramatically the rate that businesses have to pay. And I just hope we can prevent that from happening in the future.
Thank you.
And briefly, I just want to say, again, it was what Delegate Chi was talking about. I do think it's difficult sometimes that when things are going good, our small businesses are paying less. When things are bad, that's when they're paying more, and our table is a little bit, I think I would look for your input on ways to make that table better and more fair. Again, it makes no sense to be at A when things are going well, but then at F when things are going poorly. And that's when you have the most claims. And again, we're talking the small businesses, those that are, you know, minimum wage, $20 an hour, those are the ones with the most loss. And while I don't know what the amount is that they pay percentage-wise, it is very damning to them. So I would look for some guidance as well on that. And as a secretary, and I will go ahead and adopt that title too now, I think it's fitting. I would ask you to, I really did like your answer about the telework. I think one of the things that our state has is a very difficult time paying their employees. It's financially. And I think that when you allow people to telework, that's a beautiful raise. It's a beautiful quality of life. So I look forward to you actually expanding on that. And I'm sure you're well aware that in order for that to happen, and the gentleman mentioned it, you have to have good middle managers that are doing more than just making sure people are sitting down at 9 a.m. and that they're measuring their production. And lastly, I'll say on that, with some of the pins that may still be missing, I look forward to each of our secretaries going through and making sure that we're not as bloated as we need to be. There are quite a few folks that have been around a while. They're not really producing anymore. And in most of our agencies, there's enough of those that can go back to actually doing a job that produces. Because part of our job is keeping these, these pins filled. Some of these pins may need to go away. And I say that because running an efficient ship is important, because we're the stewards of our citizens' money. But again, I commend you on the hybrid model. I believe Delegate Rose did have a very good point about calling back, but that's more the program side.
Yeah.
And it's more making sure that your middle management is aware of what those workers are doing, and they should be able to work from home. And that needs to be, in most cases when possible, that needs to be the default answer. You'll bring a lot more to the citizenry, take a lot more people off the road. So I commend you for that outlook.
Thank you.
Would you have, that was, oh, really?
That was it.
You guys were, oh, okay, that was beautiful. I apologize. Well, no, I was gonna say, well, I want to say, I do appreciate your brevity, and my colleagues, many of them, Delegate Charkoudian, thank you, held themselves and held back their tongues quite a bit, because I know she had a lot more to say, and I'm sure you'll hear from her a lot more anyway. But thank you, guys. Please, as I've said to everybody that comes through, and especially Madam Secretary, don't be shy about coming in and testifying on your bills, on things that affect you. Letters of support are, I guess they're fine, but availing yourself to my committee so they can answer the questions of the day, that would be more important. So we can see you, get to have a relationship with you, and you'll be able to hear sometimes when you're paying attention to these hearings, the frustration of the citizens that we have to deal with. So I do believe it's important that our agencies and our agency heads participate in as much as possible. And I look forward to seeing you participate as much as you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I believe that we're done for the day. I do know that we have a dinner tonight. You guys know that, right? Another dinner at a good restaurant. I believe I'd like to see everybody there on time, 6 o'clock, if you can make it. Looking forward to seeing my colleagues tonight as well. Otherwise, tomorrow, what time is it? 11:45? 11:45 on the floor. Okay, but I look forward to seeing as many of you as we can tonight. Thank you guys very much. Meeting adjourned.
Were they expecting more? I feel bad. I was like, I kind of